Good evening. Tonight we're diving into a topic that's as universally unpleasant as finding a single soggy Cheerio at the bottom of your coffee cup: being poor. Or more accurately, being kept poor. It's a state of being that many politicians love to talk about, usually with the same level of sincerity as a cat apologizing for knocking over a priceless vase. They stand at podiums, their faces contorted into expressions of deep concern, and promise to lift everyone up. And yet, somehow, the financial ladder seems to have fewer rungs every year, and the ones that are left are greased with something suspiciously like artisanal avocado oil, available only to a select few. You see, poverty isn't just a random unfortunate accident like spilling mustard on a new white shirt. It's often the result of a series of deliberate, calculated decisions, a complex tapestry woven with threads of policy, legislation, and a healthy dose of what can only be described as strategic indifference. These aren't just abstract economic theories, they are concrete political tactics designed either by intention or by convenient neglect to ensure that the economic pie is sliced in a very particular way. A way where a tiny sliver of the population gets the entire cherry-filled center, while the rest of us are left fighting over the burnt crust. So tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain on this infuriating magic show. We're going to examine the 10 specific political tactics that actively work to keep you in a state of financial precarity. We'll look at the sleight of hand, the misdirection, and the outright trickery that shapes our economic reality. This isn't about partisan blame-slinging. It's about understanding the machinery that operates just beneath the surface of our society, quietly siphoning wealth upwards. So, grab a notepad or just a stiff drink because you're going to need one. Let's get started. Let's begin with the crown jewel of financial manipulation: tax loopholes. Now, the tax code is supposed to be a system for funding our society, roads, schools, emergency services, the government agency, that determines the official crispness of a pickle. It's meant to be a shared responsibility. But in reality, the United States tax code is less of a shared burden and more of a 70,000-page choose-your-own-adventure book where, if you can afford the right accountant, every path leads to a treasure chest overflowing with gold doubloons. While you're meticulously saving receipts for your home office deduction, which is just a corner of your bedroom, billionaires are using loopholes big enough to sail a yacht through. These loopholes aren't accidents, they are meticulously crafted pieces of legislation. Take the carried interest loophole. It allows private equity and hedge fund managers to have their income taxed at the lower capital gains rate instead of the higher income tax rate. This single, seemingly obscure rule saves a handful of the wealthiest people in the country billions of dollars a year. It's like your boss telling you that instead of paying regular income tax, you can just classify your salary as magic beans and pay a much lower enchanted vegetable tax. It makes no sense, but it's fantastic for the bean owner. The argument for these loopholes is always the same tired old song: they stimulate investment and encourage economic growth. But what they really do is starve the public treasury. Every dollar that a corporation or a billionaire avoids paying is a dollar that can't be used to repair a bridge, fund a school, or invest in scientific research. It's a direct transfer of wealth from the public good to private pockets. It's a system where the people who benefit most from the stability and infrastructure of the country are the ones who contribute the least proportionally to maintain it. Think about it this way: when you and I pay our taxes, we're chipping in for the community potluck. We bring our little Tupperware of potato salad or a plate of brownies. The ultra-wealthy, thanks to these loopholes, are allowed to show up, eat half the buffet, and leave behind a single, sad, half-eaten bread roll as their contribution. They get to enjoy the party without ever really helping to pay for it, and politicians are the bouncers at the door waving them right in. So, while politicians are on television debating marginal tax rates for the middle class, the real action is happening in the fine print. It's in the complex clauses and obscure provisions that are lobbied for and inserted by armies of lawyers and lobbyists. These loopholes ensure that the tax system functions less like a fair contribution system and more like a regressive one, where the burden falls heaviest on those who can least afford it, effectively cementing the financial advantage of the already rich. Next up is a concept so simple yet so politically contentious it's baffling: the minimum wage. The idea is that if you work a full-time job, you should be able to afford a basic, decent standard of living. A radical notion, I know. Yet the federal minimum wage in the United States has been stuck at $7.25 an hour since 2009. To put that in perspective, in 2009, the first Avatar movie came out, the Black Eyed Peas were dominating the charts, and planking hadn't even become a weird, brief internet phenomenon yet. Our wages are literally stuck in the pre-planking era. The primary argument against raising the minimum wage is that it will kill jobs and cripple small businesses. This is a talking point that has been trotted out with the reliability of a cuckoo clock, and it is just as wooden and repetitive. While some studies show minor negative effects, a vast body of economic research, including studies from cities and states that have raised their wages significantly, shows minimal to no impact on overall employment levels. In fact, when low-wage workers have more money, they tend to spend it immediately in their local economies, which actually helps businesses. So who benefits from a stagnant minimum wage? The answer is depressingly simple. Large corporations with business models that rely on a vast, low-paid workforce. Think about the massive retail chains and fast food giants. For them, every penny they don't have to pay their employees is a penny that goes directly to their bottom line and into the pockets of shareholders. They can afford to pay more. They simply choose not to, and they spend millions lobbying politicians to ensure they never have to. It's a massive, hidden subsidy for some of the most profitable companies in the world. This stagnation has a devastating effect on the working class. When wages don't keep up with the rising cost of housing, healthcare, and education, people are forced to work multiple jobs, take on debt, and forego basic necessities. It creates a permanent state of financial anxiety, a hamster wheel of working constantly just to stay in the same place. It's not a stepping stone to a better life. It's a treadmill designed to keep you running in place until you collapse, at which point you'll be replaced by someone else just as desperate. Ultimately, keeping the minimum wage artificially low is a political choice. It's a decision to prioritize corporate profits over the well-being of millions of workers. It sends a clear message that a full day's work is not, in fact, worthy of a life free from poverty. It's a tactic that ensures a permanent underclass of workers who are too busy trying to survive to have the time or resources to demand anything better. And that for some is a very convenient arrangement. Let's talk about education, or more specifically the systematic defunding of public education. We all pay lip service to the idea that education is the great equalizer, the primary engine of upward mobility. It's the story we tell ourselves. Work hard in school, and you can achieve anything. But that story becomes a cruel joke when the schools themselves are crumbling, overcrowded, and stripped of the resources they need to function. This isn't happening by accident. It's a direct result of political decisions to cut education funding. These cuts manifest in numerous ways. They mean larger class sizes where teachers are stretched so thin they can't give individual students the attention they need. It means outdated textbooks, some of which might still refer to Pluto as a planet, or list the Soviet Union as a current world power. It means the elimination of arts, music, and sports programs, the very things that can engage students and teach them valuable life skills. And critically, it means schools in poorer neighborhoods, which rely more heavily on public funds, are hit the hardest, perpetuating a cycle of disadvantage. The rationale given for these cuts is almost always fiscal responsibility or the need to tighten our belts. It's a noble-sounding excuse, but it crumbles under the slightest scrutiny. While politicians are pleading poverty when it comes to school funding, they often have no problem finding money for corporate tax breaks, subsidies for profitable industries, or bloated defense contracts. It's a matter of priorities, and time again, public education is placed at the bottom of the list. It's like a family saying they can't afford to buy their kids shoes while simultaneously installing a solid gold toilet. The long-term impact of this is catastrophic. When you systematically underfund public education, you're limiting the potential of an entire generation. You're ensuring that a child's future success is determined not by their talent or work ethic, but by the zip code they grew up in. This creates a less skilled workforce, a less informed citizenry, and a society where the American dream is accessible only to those who can afford to buy their way into it through private schools and expensive tutoring. This isn't just about limiting opportunities. For some, it's about control. A population that is less educated is less likely to question authority, less able to critically analyze political rhetoric, and more susceptible to misinformation. By hamstringing public education, certain political forces are not just saving money in the short term, they are cultivating a more pliable electorate for the long term. It's a deeply cynical tactic that sacrifices the future of millions for political gain, ensuring that the ladder of opportunity is not just hard to climb, but has had its lower rungs sawed off entirely. There is perhaps no greater source of financial vulnerability for the average person than healthcare. In the United States, getting sick can be a catastrophic financial event, capable of wiping out a lifetime of savings in just a matter of weeks. And this isn't some kind of natural law, it's actually the direct consequence of a system where access to affordable healthcare is restricted, creating a permanent state of precarity for millions. Politicians who block efforts to expand access are, in effect, using your health as a tool to keep you financially insecure. The primary way this is done is by fighting against universal or single-payer healthcare systems and resisting expansions of programs like Medicaid. The arguments are always cloaked in the language of freedom and choice, suggesting that a market-based system is superior. But what choice does a person with a pre-existing condition really have? What freedom is there in choosing between life-saving medication and paying your rent? For many folks, the only choice is to go without care, just hoping a minor issue doesn't become a major one. This system creates a vicious cycle. People without adequate insurance delay seeking treatment for minor ailments until they become emergencies, which are vastly more expensive to treat. A simple infection that could have been cleared up with a $20 antibiotic becomes a multi-thousand-dollar hospital stay for sepsis. This, in turn, drives up costs for everyone. Furthermore, the fear of losing employer-sponsored health insurance keeps people tethered to jobs they might otherwise leave for better opportunities, stifling entrepreneurship and career mobility. It's really a form of modern-day indentured servitude where your health benefits are the chains. The beneficiaries of this restrictive system are, of course, the private insurance companies, pharmaceutical giants, and for-profit hospital chains. They reap enormous profits from this manufactured scarcity and complexity. They also spend staggering amounts of money on lobbying to ensure the system remains a confusing, expensive labyrinth that works in their favor. Politicians, in turn, receive generous campaign donations to protect this status quo, all while telling their constituents that they are fighting for them. It's a betrayal of the most fundamental duty of a government to protect the well-being of its citizens. Ultimately, limiting access to affordable healthcare is a powerful tool for maintaining a compliant, anxious workforce. A person worried about a medical bill they can't pay is less likely to strike for better wages, less likely to take a risk on a new business, and less likely to demand political change. They are trapped. By treating healthcare not as a human right but as a commodity to be bought and sold, politicians ensure that a simple twist of fate, an accident, a diagnosis, can be the trigger that pushes a family from stability into poverty. Let's talk about a word that gets thrown around in political circles with almost religious fervor: deregulation. The idea, as it's sold to the public, is that government regulations are a pesky, tangled web of red tape that stifles innovation and suffocates businesses. If we just get government out of the way, the free market will unleash a torrent of prosperity for all. It sounds wonderful, like a promise of a world without traffic jams or long lines at the DMV. But the reality of deregulation is often far more dangerous and destructive. Think of regulations as the safety rules in a complex factory. They're there to ensure the machinery doesn't explode, the workers don't get maimed, and the toxic waste doesn't get dumped into the local river. Deregulation is the equivalent of the factory owner deciding those rules are too expensive, so they fire all the safety inspectors, disable the emergency shutoffs, and tell the workers to just be more careful. What could possibly go wrong? The answer, as we saw with the 2008 financial crisis, is everything. The 2008 crisis was a direct result of the deregulation of the financial industry. Banks were allowed to engage in incredibly risky behavior, bundling and selling toxic mortgages with little to no oversight. When the house of cards inevitably collapsed, it didn't just hurt the bankers who made the bad bets. It wiped out the life savings of millions of ordinary people, caused a massive wave of foreclosures, and threw the global economy into a tailspin. The people who suffered the most were the ones who had nothing to do with the risky behavior, while the institutions responsible were deemed too big to fail and bailed out with taxpayer money. This pattern repeats across industries. Deregulating environmental protections leads to more pollution, which disproportionately harms low-income communities. Deregulating labor standards leads to lower wages and more dangerous working conditions. Deregulating the food industry can lead to outbreaks of foodborne illness. In each case, the benefits of deregulation flow to the top, to the corporate executives and shareholders who see increased profits, while the costs and the risks are offloaded onto the public. It's a classic case of privatizing the gains and socializing the losses. Politicians who champion aggressive deregulation are not doing it to help the average person. They are doing it at the behest of powerful corporate lobbies, who stand to make billions from a lack of oversight. They sell it as a populist crusade against big government, but it's really a way to let the biggest players on the field write their own rules. The result is an economy that is more volatile, more unequal, and more dangerous for consumers and workers, creating the very economic instability that keeps people trapped in a cycle of boom and, more often, bust. Now we come to the root system from which so many of these other problems grow: campaign finance. In a functioning democracy, the principle is supposed to be one person, one vote. But in the American political system, it often feels more like $1, one vote. The way we fund our elections has been so thoroughly manipulated that it allows the interests of wealthy donors and powerful corporations to drown out the voices of ordinary citizens, ensuring that policy is written for the few, not the many. The problem was supercharged by court decisions like Citizens United, which essentially opened the floodgates for unlimited corporate spending in elections. This created a system of super PACs and dark money groups, where billionaires and corporations can pour endless, often anonymous cash into influencing elections. A politician knows that their electoral survival may depend not on pleasing their constituents, but on keeping a handful of mega donors happy. It creates a constant implicit threat. Vote the wrong way, and we'll fund a primary challenger to take you out. This creates a toxic dynamic where politicians are in a perpetual state of fundraising. They spend more time dialing for dollars at call centers than they do studying policy or meeting with the people they represent. This isn't a secret, it's just the accepted reality of modern politics. The need for money shapes who can even afford to run for office in the first place, and it dictates the legislative agenda. Issues that are critical to the public, like affordable housing or raising the minimum wage, are often ignored because they don't have powerful, wealthy lobbies behind them. Meanwhile, issues favored by wealthy donors like tax cuts for the rich or industry deregulation are constantly at the top of the legislative docket. It's a pay-to-play system hiding in plain sight. A corporation can spend a few $1,000,000 on lobbying and campaign contributions and get a tax break or a government contract worth billions in return. It's the best return on investment imaginable, and it comes at the direct expense of the public good. It's why your prescription drugs are so expensive and why your internet bill is so high. Ultimately, this system of campaign finance manipulation is the ultimate tactic for keeping people poor because it rigs the entire game. It ensures that the very people who have the power to change the rules are beholden to the ones who benefit from the rules staying exactly as they are. It creates a government that is responsive to the needs of its funders, not its citizens. Until we can get big money out of politics, we'll be stuck in a feedback loop where wealth buys political power, and political power is used to accumulate even more wealth. Having a stable, affordable place to live is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Holding a job, raising a family, staying healthy. Yet, housing policy is frequently manipulated to favor real estate developers, landlords, and wealthy investors, making that fundamental need increasingly unattainable for ordinary people. This isn't just a market fluctuation, it's a policy-driven crisis designed to extract wealth from tenants and homebuyers. One of the key ways this happens is through zoning laws. Many cities have restrictive zoning ordinances, often pushed by wealthy homeowners and developers, that limit the construction of new, denser housing like apartment buildings and duplexes. They'll use arguments about preserving neighborhood character or preventing traffic, but the real effect is to artificially limit the housing supply. When supply is low and demand is high, prices skyrocket. This is fantastic news if you're a property owner watching your investment grow, but it's devastating if you're a renter or a first-time homebuyer. Then there's the issue of subsidies and tax breaks. Governments often provide massive financial incentives to luxury real estate developers, arguing it will revitalize an area. But often, these projects result in high-end condos and expensive retail spaces that do nothing to address the local need for affordable housing. In fact, they often accelerate gentrification, pushing out long-term, lower-income residents. Meanwhile, funding for public housing and rental assistance programs like Section 8 is consistently underfunded, leaving millions of eligible families on years-long waiting lists. We also see a lack of meaningful tenant protections in many parts of the country. Policies that would provide rent control, just cause eviction standards, or the right to legal counsel in housing court are fiercely opposed by landlord and real estate lobbies. This gives landlords immense power over their tenants, allowing them to raise rents exorbitantly or evict families with little recourse. The fear of homelessness or a sudden, unaffordable rent hike keeps people in a constant state of instability, unable to put down roots or save for the future. The end result of these manipulated policies is a housing market that functions less as a system for providing shelter and more as a casino for investors. The commodification of housing means that a basic human need is treated as just another asset class, like stocks or gold. Politicians, often heavily funded by the real estate industry, are complicit in this system. They champion policies that inflate property values and protect landlord profits, all while the dream of affordable, stable housing slips further and further away for the people they are supposed to represent. These are programs like food stamps, unemployment insurance, and temporary assistance for needy families. They were created with a simple, humane premise. In a wealthy society, no one should starve, and a temporary setback like losing a job shouldn't lead to utter destitution. This safety net is supposed to be the floor that catches you when you fall. But for decades, there has been a concerted political effort to cut, shred, and dismantle this net, leaving gaping holes for people to fall through. The attacks on these programs are often framed with deeply cynical and misleading rhetoric. Politicians talk about welfare queens, dependency, and the need to promote personal responsibility. They paint recipients of aid not as fellow citizens who have fallen on hard times, but as lazy, undeserving drains on the system. This narrative serves to stigmatize poverty and create resentment among taxpayers, making it politically easier to justify cutting these vital programs. It's a classic divide-and-conquer strategy. The cuts themselves are insidious. They often don't come as a single dramatic slash, but as a death by 1,000 cuts. Politicians will add complicated work requirements, impose lifetime limits on benefits, or make the application process so bureaucratic and difficult that many eligible people simply give up. For example, requiring an applicant to have internet access and a scanner to apply for food stamps when that person can't afford food, let alone a home internet plan, is a deliberately cruel barrier to entry. Who benefits from this? In the short term, it allows politicians to claim they are cutting spending and being fiscally conservative, which plays well with certain voters. But in the long term, the costs are simply shifted elsewhere. A child who doesn't get enough to eat is more likely to have health problems and do poorly in school, leading to higher healthcare and social costs down the line. A person who can't get unemployment benefits might end up homeless, placing a greater strain on emergency services and shelters. It's not saving money, it's just moving it from an efficient preventative column to an inefficient emergency column. Ultimately, cutting social programs is a tactic that reinforces poverty by removing the very mechanisms designed to alleviate it. It takes away the stability that people need to get back on their feet. How can you effectively search for a job if you're worried about where your family's next meal is coming from? By weakening the safety net, politicians ensure that a single stroke of bad luck, a layoff, an illness, a car breakdown, can spiral into a full-blown crisis, trapping individuals and families in a cycle of poverty from which it is incredibly difficult to escape. Debt is a constant drain on resources, a source of immense psychological stress, and a powerful barrier to building wealth. And many government policies, particularly around student loans and consumer debt, seem almost perfectly designed to create and sustain this trap, ensuring that millions of people begin their adult lives already deep in a financial hole. Let's start with student loans, the albatross around the neck of an entire generation. The cost of higher education has exploded, far outpacing inflation and wage growth. This is due in part to cuts in state funding for public universities, which then raise tuition to make up the difference. The government, in turn, happily backs federal loans to cover these rising costs, creating a feedback loop. The result? Americans now owe over $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. It's a staggering number, a national crisis hiding in plain sight. What makes this debt so uniquely crippling is how difficult it is to escape. Unlike most other forms of debt, student loan debt is, in most cases, not dischargeable in bankruptcy. This was a specific policy change lobbied for by the financial industry. It means that whether you get sick, lose your job, or find that your expensive degree didn't lead to the high-paying job you were promised, that debt will follow you to the grave. The government will even garnish your social security checks to pay it back. It's a life sentence of payments. Beyond student loans, there are policies that favor creditors over debtors at every turn. For example, the weakening of consumer protection regulations allows for predatory lending practices, from payday loans with astronomical interest rates to credit cards with hidden fees and ballooning penalties. Bankruptcy laws have also been made more stringent, making it harder for people who are truly overwhelmed to get a fresh start. The system is tilted to ensure that once you fall into debt, it is incredibly difficult to climb back out. This culture of debt has profound consequences. It delays major life milestones like buying a home, starting a family, or saving for retirement. It forces people to make career choices based not on their passion or talent, but on which job will best allow them to service their debt. It creates a population that is financially fragile and risk-averse. A person shackled by debt is not a free economic agent. They are a servant to their creditors. And for politicians who want a compliant, desperate populace, that's a feature, not a bug. After all, you can't solve a problem that you refuse to acknowledge. This isn't just a passive oversight, it's an active political strategy designed to maintain the status quo by convincing the public that the system is fundamentally fair, even when the evidence overwhelmingly shows that it is not. It is the grand gaslight that makes all the other tactics possible. This denial takes many forms. You'll hear politicians pivot from questions about wealth inequality to talk about opportunity, insisting that everyone has a fair shot if they just work hard or pull themselves up by their bootstraps. This is a comforting, but ultimately hollow narrative. It ignores the fact that some people are born with diamond-encrusted jet-powered boots, while others don't even have straps to pull on. It individualizes a systemic problem, shifting the blame for poverty from policy failures to personal failings. Another common tactic is to muddy the waters with misleading statistics or to frame the debate in a way that benefits the wealthy. They'll talk about the stock market hitting record highs as if that's a universal indicator of prosperity, ignoring the fact that the vast majority of stocks are owned by the wealthiest 10% of the population. They'll argue that taxing the rich will punish success, framing a basic principle of a progressive society as some kind of vindictive attack. It's a masterclass in misdirection. This rhetoric is amplified by a vast ecosystem of think tanks, media outlets, and commentators funded by the very people who benefit most from inequality. They produce a constant stream of articles, studies, and talking points designed to create doubt and confusion. They'll argue that inequality is a natural and even desirable outcome of a competitive market, or that efforts to reduce it will inevitably lead to economic ruin and Soviet-style communism. It's a relentless propaganda campaign designed to protect concentrated wealth. By pretending that extreme wealth inequality is not a problem, or even that it doesn't exist, politicians give themselves cover to continue pursuing the very policies that create it. They can keep cutting taxes on the rich, deregulating industries, and starving public services, all while claiming to be champions of the common person. It is the final, crucial lock on the cage, because as long as a significant portion of the population can be convinced that there is no cage, they will never demand to be set free. 10 beautifully crafted, politically honed tactics designed to ensure that the economic ladder is less of a ladder and more of a greasy pole with a bouncer at the bottom, checking your family's net worth. It's a system where tax codes read like treasure maps for the rich, the minimum wage is a historical artifact, and your health is a pre-existing condition for financial ruin. It's enough to make you want to scream into a pillow, or perhaps, into a publicly funded megaphone, if only we could get one of those funded. And look, the natural response to all of this is a deep, soul-crushing cynicism. A feeling that the game is so thoroughly rigged that there's no point in even playing. And believe me, that feeling is exactly what the architects of this system want you to feel. Apathy is the lubricant that keeps this machine running smoothly. They are counting on you to get overwhelmed, to tune out, and to decide that wrestling with the intricacies of the carried interest loophole is less interesting than watching a video of a cat falling off a Roomba. And frankly, they're not wrong about the cat video, it's objectively fantastic television. But here's the thing, understanding these tactics is the first step toward dismantling them. It's about recognizing that your financial struggles are not just a personal failing, but often the result of a political choice. And since they are choices, different choices can be made. It means demanding that politicians talk about these issues, not in vague platitudes, but with specific plans. It means voting, organizing, and refusing to accept that this is just the way things are, because the way things are is, and I believe this is the technical term for it, complete and utter bullshit. Thank you.